Well, good morning. Welcome, everyone. And again, thank you for joining us for our second session. I know we had a long title to it here, Building Tomorrow's Water District, Customer Engagement and Life Cycle Replacement. I have to tell you, I was at the Citrus Heights board meeting. I've been to a couple of them now a while back, and that's when I first learned, and I'll give a little bit of their thunder away about their 2030 project. And I saw the engagement happening in the room there with the staff and with the board and with their constituents, and I thought, this is really unique. I hadn't seen that often out in the public as I visit different water districts. So I kind of hit Hillary up to see if there was a chance that maybe they would think about doing something for this group in what they went through here, and they were most gracious to do that. So rather than introducing everybody individually and talk about their background, their educational background, and their graduate degrees, I'm going to turn it over to Madeline here. She's going to sort of kick it off for the project, sort of set the stage for you, and appreciate you guys being here. This is wonderful. Thank you. Sorry. I'm going to help her out here. Please remember to silence your cell phones now, everybody. Don't forget, we have the game cards. This is the last of our seminars, and there will be a drawing for the prizes at the end of this banner, or at the end of the presentation. We will have mic runners, so if you have questions, look for Diana in the back there. Peter will have a mic as well. I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you all for being here with us this morning. My name is Madeline Henry. I'm a Senior Management Analyst and the Chief Board Clerk with Citrus Heights Water District. I'm going to start by giving you an overview of what we're covering today. We'll begin with some background on our district and on our Project 2030 Water Main Replacement Study. We're then going to move into our first panel discussion that will talk about community leadership and succession planning through our Customer Advisory Committee. Our second panel will focus on life cycle replacements and the project itself, and then we'll move into some lessons learned and Q&A. We will have two Q&A sessions, one at the end of each panel, so if you have questions, just feel free to write them down and keep them until the end of each panel. A little bit about us. We are a water district in northeastern Sacramento County, serving just under 20,000 connections. We have 35 employees, and we cover the city of Citrus Heights, about 2/3 of it, and also 4 unincorporated areas. We're in Sacramento County and a little tiny part of Placer County on the north part of our border. We have limited visibility, in part due to our name being the same as the city. There are also other water providers that serve the other third of the city, so people are often unsure of who their water provider is. That was one of the challenges that we faced going into this project. And our city is pretty urbanized. Our district is pretty urbanized. We're about 95% built out. This is a map of our service area. You'll see that it's broken into 3 different divisions. We have 1 board member serving in each division. The black outline is the city of Citrus Heights itself. You may be able to see, depending on where you're sitting, there are little white circles on the slide. Those are our neighborhood areas that the city set up when they incorporated in the late 90s. There are 11 of them, and we're able to use those as an outlet to communicate with the residents that live within the city. And then in our unincorporated areas, they have neighborhood groups as well. To get us started, I'm going to show a video that summarizes Project 2030 and our Customer Advisory Committee.
This is the work behind your water, often out of sight, out of mind.
Our infrastructure is out of view. It's below ground.
People don't think about utility districts. They're under the radar.
When Citrus Heights Water District embarked on Project 2030, an essential but expensive project to replace more than half of the district's water mains, leaders connected with the community they serve in a way few water districts have.
It was critical for us that we involve the customer base and a really good cross-section of customers to help the board and our team come up with a solution that's not only financially feasible, but is supported by the customers.
Meet the Customer Advisory Committee, or CAC, 24 people from different backgrounds from all over the area, representing homeowners and businesses.
They all bring different perspectives to the table to help solve the same problem.
This is felt from the beginning to be something authentic, a reasonable way to pay for something really expensive.
The water system in Citrus Heights, with 250 miles of pipes that move water from Folsom Lake throughout the community, is aging. Much of it was built as the area itself was developed from the 1960s to the 80s.
We've seen in other parts of our state and throughout the country what happens when we have catastrophic water main failures. It's extremely expensive to repair and to replace. We would rather be able to do it in a proactive way versus a reactive way.
We do anticipate a large amount of water mains needing to be replaced starting in the year 2030. So that's how we came up with that name.
Project 2030 is a $500 million investment set to run from 2030 through the year 2080. Citrus Heights Water turned to the CAC to help decide the best way to pay for it.
I've lived in a few different communities in California. I'm not aware of any other opportunity to have this kind of voice as a customer.
And it's just the beginning. Citrus Heights Water is including the CAC in a new project to reduce costs and replace aging water meters that's now grown to a partnership of 11 agencies around the Sacramento area.
We started this meter replacement program with the basic question, well, why are we all using different meters? I call it sensible integration.
Planning for the future. It's clear to these community members, now more than ever, we have to invest in our most essential resource.
A clean and reliable source of water is the way we start our day every day.
All right, so as the video mentioned, we realized that between 2030 and 2055, over 50% of our water mains are going to need to be replaced. This led us to develop Project 2030, a water main replacement study. We had a few goals in this project. The first was to create an implementation plan and a funding structure for how we could actually replace those mains. But we wanted to take it a step further and empower our customers to become leaders and really understand the process that we were going through. We also wanted to learn how to better tell our story so that way the customers and the public at large would know what we were doing. Project 2030 had 6 phases. It started with an asset inventory where we went through all of our records and figured out what exactly we had underground, how old the pipes were, what they were made of, and where they were located. Then it led to future water demand projections and water main assessment and costs to figure out what we might want to replace them with. From there, we had to figure out a funding strategy and a rate analysis of how we could potentially pay for it all. We then conducted market research to test out our options, and the part we're currently working on is the implementation and phasing plan, so figuring out how to actually put all this into action. Throughout all 6 of the phases, we did incorporate public engagement in a few different ways. We created our customer advisory committee as a focus group for the project. We started to tell our story everywhere we went and at every opportunity we had, whether that was at service clubs such as Rotary or Seroptimus, at neighborhood areas. Anytime we were communicating with people in the public, we wanted to tell them about the work we were doing. We used market research to understand the political viability and to incorporate the feedback from more of our customers. And we created new outreach measures as we needed. So we ended up creating a website, creating a YouTube channel where all of our videos were posted, and creating an email listserv for anyone who was interested in learning about the CAC. We also provided regular updates to board and to all members of our staff. That way, if anyone was stopped in the field or asked at our front counter about Project 2030, they would know what it was and know enough about it to explain it to a customer. This is our CAC. There are 24 members. We have 16 residential members, 4 institutional members who don't vote. They represent the city, the school districts, parks, and the cemetery district. We also have 3 commercial members who represent business interests in the community. On the right side, you'll see our staff at the top and then also our consulting team. We provided each customer advisory committee member with this directory. We fondly call it our placemat, that has everyone's name and title so that way they could see who they were actually talking to at these meetings. On the back of our placemat, we had the ground rules for the group, including some Brown Act important things and our contact information. And on the right side, the project schedule. So that's what you all have a copy of. And I'll go to the next slide, you can see it a little bit better. This is the outline of the project itself. On the top are the different phases I talked about. On the bottom are the Customer Advisory Committee meetings. We scheduled out in advance each of the meetings to coordinate with the different phases of the project. This led to creating technical memos, which you'll see at the very bottom under the teal heading, that were given to the committee in advance, so that way they could review them. And then at the meeting, we incorporated their feedback, eventually providing them with alternatives and having them vote on them. We also provided board of director meeting updates at the 30, 60, and 90 mark. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get us started with our first panel discussion. We have on the stage our general manager, Hillary Strauss, our assistant general counsel, Josh Nelson, Jenna Moser, our CAC chair, and Carol Sheehan, our board president. All right, Hillary, to get us started, can you talk about how you recruited 4 CAC members and how you targeted diverse regions in the customer base?
Right. Well, we thought that it would be very, very important given the scope and cost and all of the policy, project, and capital improvement program implications for the replacement of what would be over half of our service area's water mains, that we have as broadly based representation and as much involvement at the grassroots level in terms of our customer participation as we possibly could, as yet another resource along with the engineering and financial and public outreach and market research resources that we were marshaling for the boards, to support the board in their decision-making process and to provide all the very best options fleshed out as possible. So with that in mind, we did, as you had highlighted at your opening presentation, then look at the structure of the Customer Advisory Committee and make sure we had really strong representation from different customer segments, such as the residential, of course, being the #1 area of focus. So we have 17 seats that we put together on this 24-member advisory committee. Then we also had the representation. We wanted to make sure we had commercial interests. So we have a mall area, a large 10-block area around the mall that's a commercial property-based business improvement district. And so we wanted to make sure they had representation. Then we have a large, kind of a traditional retail corridor. It's the old US Highway 40 before Interstate 80 was built, the old Lincoln Highway area, Auburn Boulevard. So we wanted to make sure that that area had representation. So we created 3 commercial seats, and then we also have those 4 ex officio, large agency, large user public seats with the different agencies you mentioned. So then we went about how could we do a recruitment to make sure that we had broad representation within those categories. And so we did a variety of different ways of advertising through social media, through the local newspaper, and other means, and we were surprised that we were concerned maybe we wouldn't have enough interest. Well, our cup runneth over, and we had 41 applicants, and so the board had to look at all of the applicants, and it was very difficult, I think, for the board to make those decisions and for our team to look at those applications and figure out who wouldn't be on that committee, because there was so many talented people that came out of really the woodwork to say we want to be involved in helping to plan, the future of our district. So with that in mind, I think great care was given to trying to select customers to be on the committee who were long-standing customers, folks who were relatively new but had lived in other areas and dealt with some of these issues that we were looking at, from different professional backgrounds. I think we have folks with finance backgrounds and other professional and life perspectives represented, so we have a very broadly based representation on the committee. And then, of course, all of these meetings are open to the public, and we also have an e-notifier where folks can sign up on the website and get alerts to come to those meetings. And then, of course, all of them have been videotaped and are on demand for folks to watch at our YouTube channel, Citrus Heights Water District channel.
All right, thank you. Josh, can you walk us through how the CAC was formed and how they were trained to be Brown Act compliant?
Yeah, so the CAC was formed through a formal resolution adopted by the board of directors. The resolution created the committee, appointed the initial members, and sort of laid out what the purpose of the committee would be and sort of the rules of the road as to how it would operate. I think the important thing for formation was the decision of, is it going to be a Brown Act body or not be a Brown Act body? And so in our case, obviously, because it was formed by a resolution, it is a Brown Act body. We had some discussions on the staff level about, what about a non-Brown Act body? And it would have been, possible for us to do that. We could have had a series of sort of informal workshops with Hillary that wasn't appointed by the board, or through some other avenues to try to structure it that way. But staff really felt that the appropriate recommendation to our board was for it to be a formal Brown Act body. I think the first reason for that is just basic transparency. As you could tell from the video and the discussion so far, this is a really big project for the community, and so it just was important for it to be part of a public process. Second, I think related but a little bit different is just sort of the purpose of the CAC. So there was value for us in transparency because the whole point of this project, or a big part of the point of this project, was making sure the public was aware of the problem and having an opportunity for them to provide input. And that included both the CAC members, but also just the general public. And so forcing or having those CAC meetings be opened and agendized online, just really available for people to access, it sort of naturally provided resources for members of the public who might be interested in ways for more information about the project to get out. And then the third reason, it's sort of unique to CHWD, is succession planning. So I think a lot of agencies talk about succession planning in terms of staff, but one of the things that our board has talked to our staff about is the importance of sort of developing the next generation of future board members. And so the CAC sort of provides sort of a natural training ground to a certain extent for those folks who might be interested. It gets them involved in the district, they become aware of staff. It also, I think, introduces people who may not be aware to how local government works. So I think for all of us in the room, it's really clear how a Brown Act meeting runs and how public comment and all that handles, but I think there's some value in getting the next generation of leaders involved early. And then, because we decided to take a jump and make it a Brown Act body, we had to worry about compliance. So the way we handled that was the first meeting of the CAC included an orientation. That orientation ran through Brown Act, PRA, Public Records Act, and some really basic conflict stuff. I think we've all sat through a number of Brown Act trainings. I think what we tried to do for that training was make sure it was tailored appropriately. You could have a couple of hours on Brown Act training and dive into issues that wouldn't be relevant to the CAC. So what we really tried to focus on was the high-level stuff. It's an agendized meeting, so we only talk about things on the agenda. Public comment, public gets to talk. We try not to, engage, and we avoid serial meetings outside. We didn't get into things like closed sessions or other things that would be simply beyond the scope of the CAC.
Thank you. And Jenna, in your role as CAC chair, how did you become interested in joining the CAC?
Great question. I was new to the area in Citrus Heights, and so I was looking at all kinds of different social media places to see what the community was like, what was going on. And I saw a post for the Customer Advisory Committee and submitted my credentials and my little blurb, kind of expecting not to really ever hear anything about it ever again. Fortunately, I did hear back, and it's been a cool process. I think the way that they've recruited some people from different parts of our community through the different ways people use social media. A different segment of the population is going to look at next door posts over Facebook posts, over Instagram posts, or whatever. Tailor your message to those specific things to get the kind of people to respond that you want. I think you guys got a good response because you did that.
Can you touch on how your role as chair has shaped your interactions with other community members now that you've been a part of this process?
It's been a really good way to get involved in the community with people that are making changes and wanted to dedicate their time to some kind of larger purpose, which is a great community building thing. I think it's going to be good for the district to have this diverse group of people maintain contact with each other over like years now. I mean, this is like 2 years or getting close to it. Yeah, I think it's super valuable to have that diversity.
All right, thank you. And Carol, in your role as board president, can you share some of the new insights you've gained throughout this process?
Sure. number one, we realize that our constituents, the folks who are receiving our water, are concerned about more than just our rates. They are concerned about the assets that Citrus Heights Water District has, and they're concerned about the financing of that over the long term. They want to know, what debt will our children be responsible for? And so these are tough questions, but they're questions that all of us as a water district need to be able to answer. The other thing that I observed, and that Hillary alluded to, was the multidisciplinary background of our citizens, our CAC. And the fact is that by having engaged, passionate people from all these different backgrounds, they provide input from different points of view. And it really helped. It really strengthened the board staff as well, because it's one thing when they need to make a presentation to the board of directors and say, this is what we would like to do. It's a whole nother thing when they are making the same presentation to the public, who are seeing things at a different approach. They have more knowledge about certain things and less knowledge about other things. So it further excelled the quality of presentation and the board's, the Citrus Heights Water District staff's interaction with the public. So now they're interacting with the public at a whole new level, a technical level and a financial level. And the public is interacting with them on that, in that way as well. So a third thing that I'd like to add is the fact that this having to present this as it has been has also further strengthened, because they were already strong, the project management skills of the staff. They really needed to think out, how is this going to work out? What the first step, what is our mission plan? What is our statement? And then, okay, what is the risk analysis? What are the problems that we're going to come up with? How are we going to get this going? How are we going to fund it? How are we going to operate it? Take it all the way through. So the CAC required that thinking to start probably earlier than it would have. If we had not had the CAC, I don't know that thinking would have been quite as developed as early or as fully. So as a result of the CIC, I feel like the Citrus Heights Water District is way ahead of the ball regarding addressing this very large issue.
If I could just piggyback on that just for a second, is that there's been a lot of talk about transparency today in this public process. As a citizen and member of the community, there's a lot of skepticism about the government and skepticism about every rate increase that's coming. And really, like, the antidote to that is super simple. You just, tell the truth about everything and let people respond. That kind of transparency is going to get you the results that you want.
Thank you, Jenna. That's actually the perfect transition to our lessons learned slide. Starting from the bottom up, we have transparency as one of our biggest lessons learned. We really learned through this process the importance of being transparent and how to do that in different ways so people can get the information based on where they're at. This, for us, meant using different tools such as our website, our in-person meetings, answering the phone when people called and had questions, responding to emails, being there when they needed us. We also really learned the importance of engagement and also that it takes time. We had to put a lot of time into our planning. We had to also be flexible. We ended up adding in 2 extra meetings during the voting process because we knew that the CAC needed some more time to really work through the alternatives we provided them and understand them better. We also used an outside facilitator to help us work through this process and to be kind of a neutral person to work between us as the staff and the CAC. Another struggle that we faced was the length of the project. It went on for nearly 18 months. There were stretches of time where we didn't have a CAC meeting for 2 or 3 months, and we needed to figure out how to keep people engaged. We did this by sending them videos, giving them email updates, sending them meeting summaries, and then checking in with them before the next CAC meeting, giving them a call and making sure that they had remembered what we talked about last time and they were prepared for the upcoming meeting. We also developed CAC alternates. So we asked the board to appoint 4 alternates to sit on the CAC. They were non-voting members, but they participated in all of the discussions, and they were there in case somebody dropped out during the process. They could fill in and immediately be up to speed. We did end up using 3 of them throughout the process, and now we have another one who is going to be joining us during the next phase of the CAC. We also had to learn how to convey technical information in a way that the average person could understand. If they've never, stepped foot into a water district before, how can they understand all of these things? We did this by using a variety of different speakers, having them get into small groups and talk about it, pair up with their neighbor and come up with questions. We also had computer kiosks in the room where they can go and look at the material we were presenting, because oftentimes when you're in a room this size, you can't see the details on the screen, and we wanted to make sure that they had that available to them. All right, at this time, I'd like to open it up to Q&A for our first panel.
What actual decisions were the CAC making?
Well, the CAC was, first of all, getting educated about what are all the key issues involved, the engineering, the project delivery-related, phasing, costing, and funding-related issues. So once there was a clear understanding of sort of the problem statement and some of then the potential options, then it became an opportunity for the committee, working with the technical team led by Harris and also a variety of other folks who will be speaking today, to then look at all the different options for phasing, costing, and funding for the replacement of what would be over half of our water mains in our nearly 13 square mile service area. And so the Customer Advisory Committee ultimately looked at 21 different options, and then they winnowed it down to 2 finalist options, to which those options then we engaged with Godby Research, and Brian is here today to talk a little bit about that portion of the project here a little later, to do some market research testing, because after all, you can come up with the best technical and financial option imaginable, but if you do it in a vacuum and it's not politically supported, what good is it? Because there is a funding component to it, very substantial potential, in terms of how to look at the funding and how that's going to work, and the cost estimates involved that I think were highlighted in the video and through this presentation. So with that in mind, the market research testing helped to clarify some other issues, and so by the time that the Customer Advisory Committee was ready to finalize their policy recommendation to the board, they had a lot of engineering, a lot of financial planning, and a lot of public outreach and market research data to look at to help formulate their recommendation. And so where the project is now is there's still many chapters to be written. The project is now back with the staff and the technical team to help finalize the package that will then go forward to the board during the first half of 2020. And that's on the water mains. Now, the next major project that the Customer Advisory Committee is going to work on is the replacement of water meters, because we're only on our first generation of water meters, and those typically age out around age 20 or so. And we're going to need to figure out how to do that. So we've then reached out to several agencies around us to form a consortium to see how we can coordinate our work together to take advantage of an economies of scale. And that was highlighted in the video. So that's the next batch of work that our Customer Advisory Committee is going to look at for our agency.
Thank you. Dan McMillan with Helix Water District. We serve about 275,000 people just east of the city of San Diego. And we looked at this too, and I'd like to play devil's advocate if I could for a moment. When we looked at it, one question, Gina, are you now interested in running for the board?
I have political interests unrelated to the water district.
But yeah, I mean, those were some sensitivities when we looked at it with the board. They realized they were training competition. I mean, that is in there. I mean, if you're honest, and the general manager now has 24 people he sort of has to balance versus 5, and a lot of districts do very large projects without this. I certainly tried it, and we got it for finance in our district, but there was resistance, obviously, legal a little bit, the Brown Act, and there's some sensitivities there. I'm sure the attorney was talking to staff. But I guess to the president of your board, you were elected to make these decisions. Now you're sort of asking, I guess, for more input. I mean, I always look at that balance. That's what was pushed back on me. You guys were elected to do it. Why are you going out there to ask? And I see it as an education thing, very good, but I'm wondering, where's the board just wanted more input, or why you were elected as the representative to make these decisions?
Yeah, we don't feel that we're in any way pushing the decision down or trying to avoid making that decision ourselves. But what we did is we wanted to get a finger on the pulse of the community regarding this. And our thought was basically, really, was an aspect of outreach to be able to further reach the community, to address concerns regarding rate increases in the future, and also to show that this district is planning wisely. So while we realize that the decision-making is ultimately going to come back to the board to make, we feel that this was a very wise approach to get a better understanding on what we're doing is a better finger on the pulse of what the community thinks about this. So that's our purpose.
If you could get a group of, 20 reasonable people to come up with a reasonable solution, you would think that like the rest of the community might be accepting of that reasonable solution as well.
And just to address the Brown Act issue, I mean, that was, one issue potential concern I had was it's a, 24-member board. It's a big body. There's a lot of potential Brown Act issues that can come in. And I think what was a credit to the staff was how they managed those folks. And a credit to the CAC members, we didn't run into any Brown Act problems or potential serial meetings or anything. Yeah.
So our agency has gone, I'm Bruce Rupp with the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District. Our agency has gone through a similar process. It worked very, very well. Our issue was the exporting of water, which was a volatile issue in our community. And we put together an advisory committee, and we did a lot of focus group work and all of that, and it worked very, very well. As a matter of fact, speaking to what was mentioned over here, 2 members of our board came out of our Water Resources Advisory Committee, is what we called it. So they're now on our board. So there is some risk. No, I'm only kidding. That's they're very good board members because they're very well educated when they came on the board. One of the problems we faced and we were concerned about as board members, and I would address this to the chair of the board, is what happens if the recommendation coming out of your advisory committee is not adopted by the board, that you take another direction in some way, shape, or form? How prepared is your advisory committee for that, and how prepared is the board for that? Or are you just going to take the recommendation and go with it?
A good question. Yeah, and you know what? And we're not that far along in the process yet, so I don't have an answer.
I can jump in and shed some light on this issue. Of course, the board is not beholden to the advisory committee's recommendation. That said, we did have 1 board member liaison on that committee. But the other issue is that if the board decided to modify the approach that is recommended, now we have built a strong relationship with that group of customer advisory committee members, and there would be a loop back. Our goal is not to just have the customer advisory committee come do its work and then disband. I think that our thought is that there may be other projects or issues down the line to which we might want to utilize working with a customer advisory committee. Don't know what all of those are yet, but as we continue to go through our strategic planning work program that we do every year out in front of our budget process that drives our budget, there may be opportunities to engage further with the customer base at the grassroots level. And so this customer advisory committee is a wonderful tool in the board's toolbox. And I think that it will be a continual relationship back and forth. So I see a synergy there.
I'm Judy Tejeda from Crescenta Valley Water District. I have a couple questions. First of all, you have 20,000 connections and you have only 24 employees, which is amazing.
A little bit more, but small.
Give or
yeah,
take?
About 35, but we are very lean and multidisciplinary in our approach. We have very broadly written job descriptions, and our joke is hashtag no silos in our district. So we all work together.
Okay, and then are you using consultants at all to help you
Sure.
with these things?
Yeah, that is our model, which we do maintain, to your point, we do have a very core, small in-house staff that is multidisciplinary. And then we do have various specialists who we do bring in, and we flex up when we need to get something done, and then we flex back down. And that's how you can manage costs. You know, you get to too large of an agency, what my experience has been in 25 years in government is you get to a certain point is you have too many chefs in the kitchen. So I think we're in a really good spot in terms of, you know, being a medium-sized district is very efficient because we have enough resources to get things done in terms of budget and staffing, but at the same time, we don't implode upon our own weight. We're also not overly full of red tape and committees and whatnot that you see with larger agencies. And so immersed in process that then the results get pushed out or compromised. And so I think we're a very efficient model.
Okay, and then I was wondering thank you, with the members of the committee, of the customer committee, are your interactions with the 24 or 25 of you, are those smooth or is it boisterous?
I think that there was a getting to know you period at the beginning of the process where everybody was sort of feeling out how radical of an opinion you were going to have about this $500 million cost or whatever. Like, it was going to be polarizing. This is where I've participated in a few of these like public process things where I think the water district is doing this right, is having a professional come and manage this interaction with the citizens. I've been involved in a process where it was all done with staff members, you know, just trying to check that box so they could get their permit. You hire someone who really knows what they're doing and knows how to listen, make people feel heard, which is a super special skill not everybody has. Hire that professional to do this outreach. It was a much better experience this time, and I think the results are better. People felt better. We didn't fight. We all had an opportunity to speak at any time that we wanted to. So I think having that facilitator was a major element of the success of this. I don't think a typical staff can do this. You don't have the time or energy or attention to like give it the attention that it needs.
Okay, and finally, the last thing I wanted to ask was, with the board members, you have 5 board members?
3.
Oh, 3. That's
Yeah.
right. I saw you had 3 districts. Is all of it smooth that way? Are they all on board?
Well, they're very supportive of the process. Of course, the decision about the policy recommendation is still before us. But as far as the process and their commitment to public engagement and outreach, that was very, very strong and uniform. And so our board gave us clear direction that they wanted to engage with the customers in in this sort of new grassroots way, given the profoundly large implications in terms of the budget and the funding and the capital improvement program to our agency for the next generation.
Right, and I would agree that as a board, like every board, we have a variety of opinions, and it can be boisterous, but as Hillary indicated, we were all definitely of the same mindset that this is a good thing to do, and this will be a benefit to our board.
Thank you. Fred Bachmiller, Mesa Water District. We're almost the same size as we are, about the same number of service connections. We're a little bit larger. We have about 300 miles of main, and I think we're maybe a little older. We have some older mains. So sort of basic background question for you. How did you determine the need to replace the mains? Relatively young agency. What is your principal type of pipe, and why looking at mains if you're only installed in the 60s?
Well, if I may suggest, there's going to be a technical panel that's coming up next as part of this program, led by Missy Perry, our district engineer, and I think she would be best, and our team, the technical team, to answer that question. But we're a 100-year-old agency, actually. Next year will be our 100th anniversary. But yeah, to your point, the lion's share of the water mains that are in our service area were installed in conjunction with private development, inspected by the district in the period between roughly 1960 through 1985. And then they became donated assets to our district then to operate, maintain, repair, and then the big R that we're talking about today, replace. And so our technical panel will, I think, be able to describe a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the project itself.
This is a very interesting concept. It reminds me a little bit of the Citizens Redistricting Commission for creating assembly and Senate districts in California. Great grassroots effort. I was wondering if anyone has gone to the trouble of estimating costs of implementing something like this so that it could be duplicated.
Right, so again, and we touched on it in the opening video. I think the technical panel will touch on it perhaps some more. The rough cost estimate is about, for our district, about $500 million adjusted for inflation. You meant for the customer advisory?
Yeah, the CAC.
Oh, I have not looked at that piece specifically as a breakout. So if we can't answer your question today for you, give us your card and we can follow up.
We will have a second Q&A session at the end of our second panel, but for now, I'd like to thank you all for coming up here and sharing your input. All right, I'd like to introduce you to our panel. We have, to my right, your left, Ray Reilly, our Vice President of the Board, Habib Isaac with IB Consulting, Missy Pieri, our District Engineer, Andrew McDonald with Harrison Associates, and Brian Godby with Godby Research. So Ray, you served as our board liaison to the CAC. Can you talk a bit about what that experience was like and how it was to hear all the different CAC members' input?
It was great. It was a lot of fun. We invited these people in to our community, and like everybody who doesn't know about water, their eyes were this big in the first meeting. Even staff was a little bit intimidated by the setting. By the time we finished, they all understood a lot about water. You don't have to be a water expert to make sound, good governance decisions. And that's what this committee was able to do. The process was great. Staff in Citrus Heights did a super job providing the information to the committee, and then the committee was able to take that information and make plans for how we would move forward. And to the question of finding your own replacement as a director, I think it's great. I have no interest in serving on a board for 40 years. I would like to see more people engaged and involved in the process because you have to learn the political process. You have to learn how to sit and listen and listen and listen and then listen again before you get to the point where you make decisions. People have to understand the process is long and hard, and you have to make them comfortable with sitting and sitting some more. So I think it's very good to train people what it's like to sit on a board, and that's what this was, because I do want to see more people running for my seat. If I'm not doing the right job, I don't want to be left in a seat that's not properly managed. So I want to have people asking me those hard questions. And I look forward to moving forward. The best part was when we started the second phase. The second phase, I don't know what you're waving at. when I talk about the second phase, the members of the CAC came into the meeting and they were not intimidated by what we were going to do. They were excited, interested, and engaged, and ready to move forward.
Thank you, Ray. So, Missy, you served as project manager. Can you share your experience collaborating with the variety of different stakeholders and how this project was different from projects you've done in the past?
See if you hear me okay? Okay, great. Let's hold it. So throughout the course of the project, which was 18 to 24 months in duration, there were, I counted, there's probably about 50 different individuals that I worked with either directly or indirectly, which was quite a few people. There were basically 3 stakeholder groups that I worked closely with. The first stakeholder group was the district staff. There were, not just 1 or 2 people that were involved in this project. We had the engineering group that oversaw the technical elements of the project, but we also had assistance from operations. They provided input. Our finance provided input on the funding components. We had yourself, Madeline, your communications staff and marketing. They were really the workhorse of this project, setting up all the workshops. There were, 9 workshops, and overseeing that CAC selection. That was huge. Not just 1 or 2 people could do that. We had our general manager he was kind of the visionary and led us through the process, and then our legal counsel as well provided that input. So that was a great collaboration. The second stakeholder group was our consultant team, which was led by Harris and Associates, along with our other sub-consultants. And they just provide an enormous amount of work, from scanning all of our documents, inputting all of those documents into GIS, migrating that information into our asset management software. Raftelis performed all the funding analysis. And then once we were able to, the CAC picked the top 2 alternatives. We had Godby Research. They provide that market research component. And we also had our facilitator with Laura Mason-Smith. And that was a great team effort. I really liked how we collaborated at the beginning of the project, and we kind of storyboarded out all of the workshops. I thought that was really helpful for me to kind of have a vision of the project moving forward. And then the last, but not least, the third stakeholder group was our CAC, and providing that technical information to them in technical memos, and then conveying that same information at the CAC meetings and our workshops in a way that was easy for them to understand was a great collaboration process. And I really liked how they were broken out into table groups, small table group settings, and they were able to ask questions in the small group settings, and then we had facilitators that were kind of facilitating all of the tables, and then we had our experts kind of walking around the table, collaborating, answering questions. That was a really great collaboration.
Thank you. And Andrew, you served as the project lead on the consulting side. How did your interactions with the CAC shape the direction of the Project 2030 activities?
So the interactions had a lot of impact. Everything from scope and schedule to resource planning, and then the most obvious ones were communication and stakeholder engagement. This was a direct connection to the biggest group of stakeholders. Quickly on scope and schedule, again, just touching on what some others have said, having the workshop schedule published well in advance really kept focus for the team on the packets of information coming up at upcoming workshops. And so that was good from a scope and schedule standpoint. From a resource planning standpoint, as you've seen, we brought in a team to help. We brought in a facilitator to help at the workshops. We brought in a financial expert to help explain these tough topics. And we brought in a market research company to do a market survey and get some feedback from the customers as a whole. So then the big ones are communication and stakeholder engagement. Obviously, we didn't have to wait for feedback from our biggest stakeholders we got feedback immediately at these workshops, which was just great. From a communication standpoint, we had some very tough topics for folks that aren't in the water industry. And so we had to keep the CAC in mind when we were preparing our reports and our technical memos. And then we took those reports and technical memos and put them into presentations for the workshops. And we delivered the technical topics in chunks, what we started to refer to as the building blocks of the study, and give them those chunks, pieces at a time. I can't see the slides, but I think that's what's happening on the slide. So we had some cool infographics to help them see how all of these fit together. And then we used everyday examples when there was tough topics to try to get people to relate to examples in their own lives. This one, for example, this risk personal example we used was great because people started to think about how debt can be a positive thing in their own lives and used as a tool and used potentially for the district too, debt. And then, we've touched on these small groups, and one of the things I'll highlight when we did these small groups is in these groups of 2 or 3 people to drive discussion, we regularly found that different people in these groups heard different things and understood different things. And by putting them in small groups for 20 minutes, they could talk about a topic they just heard about from us in different ways, and that helped their absorption.
All right, and in your opinion, what were the biggest takeaways from the CAC in terms of feedback and input?
So for me, the immediate feedback, the immediate takeaways that we got at the workshops was great. It helped us in many ways. A lot of the feedback was how to make the material easier to read, things that weren't clear, how to clarify those things for the average reader. But the big takeaway for me, the second takeaway, the big one, was the foundation we were laying at the end when we were presenting all the alternatives to these customers, and we presented a lot of alternatives. They were able to digest those and ask really good questions, and what I think created really informed recommendation out of the process.
Thank you. Habib, as Andrew described, there are many options for the CAC to consider. Can you walk us through how you developed the 21 different financial alternatives and package them in a way that the CAC could understand?
Sure. Actually, I'm going to go a little bit out of the box here, and I'm going to stand up so I can see what we're showing here.
I want to do that too.
But that's the thing. We had to think outside the box tremendously. There's one thing where we do financing and show numbers, but with this structure, especially with Hillary being very much a visionary, we're talking about building blocks, talking about let's show puzzle pieces, let's use graphics and dashboards. And so it came to me of how are we going to show 21 alternatives? That's system overload. That's like, my first thought was that's way too much. That's going to be not easily absorbed by the CAC members. So this is a lot of different information, but what we tried to garner is let's put this in just conceptually easy to understand puzzle pieces. So what we did was we had described what are the main puzzle pieces of the funding options to this, and what we showed was you can do pay-go, which is let's just fund it 100% through rates. There's no debt, nothing else, but that would be a tremendous ask of your customers. Then there is the option of let's use some debt financing. We described what does debt financing mean? Is that a 4-letter word, or is it something that could be utilized as a tool and generate some intergenerational equity, because these improvements are going to last a very long time. And then the other thing was, if this is going to start in 2030, what if we start funding it today? And what if we start pre-funding so then the ask later on isn't as great, and we can leverage the 10 years we have now to be able to offset and mitigate some of that impact later. So with that, it was easy to show through these alternatives what is included and what is not included. And we also included some bookends where maybe the backside and the front side is one where we are funding everything 100% pay-go, which is not really available. And then what if we do the bare minimum? So we kind of get a sense of here's the bookends, and we want to get somewhere in between and understand where is the sweet spot. So with all these, we can't pre-fund the entire project before 2030. then that means not everyone is paying their fair share. What about new customers when they come online 20 years from now, 30 years from now? But we do need some level of pay-go, and then outside of that, we could incorporate some of the other options. Go ahead. And then with these variations, we found that there's many permutations that we can include, and these were easy to absorb, where we have no pre-funding, no debt. We have pre-funding, no debt, no pre-funding with debt, and the last one is let's include pre-funding and debt. And then we just include these puzzle pieces, go one more time, to show what's included, what's not included. So every alternative showed these puzzle pieces on the side, so then you could quickly understand what is included in this scenario. But you could leverage these, minimize and maximize them as well. So how much of a throttle do you want to put on these? Go ahead. And then with that, we have some dials of just how much is funded. On the left side is all about the improvements, and on the right side is more the financing. And we focus just on the graphics. We have a degraded pipe up to a pristine pipe, and then we show on every alternative, where are we landing, how much replacement are we generating, and then how are we getting there with the financing? Is it going to be pay-go, or are we going to break up the dollar to show how much of it's going to be debt financed? So with these visuals, it was easy for the CAC members to once understand the primary drivers, to then absorb all these alternatives very quickly, and then see the trends and hone in on what is the most viable solutions based on the CAC. One thing I also noticed with the CAC members was that it's not only diverse in terms of backgrounds, it was also very diverse in terms of age. And just age alone generates different perspectives and different ways of absorbing information. So I had to take that into account, that I still need, you know, the raw data and the numbers, because people think that way, but then also visuals that could also convey to people that see things more graphically and understand it. Go ahead. Oh, we're done with that. And then this shows the example, oh, go one back, where if we are using pre-funding, we are using debt, then you see the dollar broken up. So again, it's really easy to absorb quickly of, okay, I know this option is using both. And then we show that maximizing pre-funding and some level of debt may be one of the best scenarios to maximize the amount of replacement that will be achieved by the district. And then one thing that was very beneficial, every single workshop, and there was around 11 of them, had an activity at the end that focused on the content that was described by us as the panel and the contributing to the information. So then we had working groups, and it just touched on, are we talking about debt, are we talking about pre-funding, just so they get an understanding through the activity to embed it into their understanding. And next. And then from that, we then go back to even some basic polling. These are all the alternatives, and then we have the CAC members put in just dots as their votes of what they are leaning towards. And then as you can see, it really eliminated quite a few. Like some of these alternatives got none, but at least it was still documented of having that as an option. And you see that it's honing in on pretty much these two right here, and it made it very clear and easy to then have that move into the market research.
Thank you, Habib.
And I apologize for standing up, but I felt it would be a better way to explain the information.
Thank you. So Brian, as Habib just described, we had the CAC narrow down from 21 alternatives down to their top 2 through multiple meetings and the dot voting process. Can you talk about how we did market research on those 2 alternatives and how that will play into the implementation of the project?
Yeah, sure. So to start with 21 options, it doesn't work in a survey. So we needed to get to a point in the CAC process and the district process that we had some options that were pretty clear, and we could explain those. And we got it down, or the CAC got it down to 2, and that's where we came in. Now, our purpose at that point is to go beyond just the CAC, which is a tremendous tool, but we want to look at a representative sample of the entire population. And in this case, that means registered voters and non-registered voters, because we want to get everybody's input. We don't want to do this in a complete vacuum, and make sure that it is representative. We did that by making phone calls, which is old school. We also got the majority of our responses from emails and from text invitations to online surveys. So if you have the technology, that's the way most people participate. If you don't, we still make sure we get those psychographics. They're not necessarily demographic differences, but they are certainly psychographic differences included in the sample. And as we said, we had 21 options to start with. We got it down to 2, and our goal was to validate that we weren't off track and to make sure that there was political viability in that. Basically a reality check at the midpoint in the process. And we found a couple things. We can go to the first slide, yeah. First thing we found is that 75% of the population didn't know that the district wasn't a department of the city, or they just didn't know, period. So that sort of says, okay, we've got some work to do because nobody really knows about us. And that means there's a public outreach, public information effort that needs to go on, not only about the district, but if they don't know fundamentally about the district, then we need to tell them that story, and we also need to tell them what we're doing. And that's really critical. And also that's what the survey was designed to really help us figure out. So moving on to the next slide, the fundamental question is, are we on track or are we not? And this slide shows you one of the 2 options. This is 6.4. And if you look at the voter columns, which is the first and the third, you'll see that in our final test, we had about 62% that supported the idea, and we had about 63% on the initial test. Statistically speaking, they're identical. So that says, hey, you know, all this work is not for naught. A good, solid majority of the people support it. It was a little bit different with the second option. We were at 55% on our final test, but statistically speaking, there is no difference. We've got a 5% error rate on the data, plus or minus. For both of these splits, we only got one version or the other. We didn't give you both and say, what do you think about A, and then what do you think about B, because B is always not as positive. So statistically, we're within the margin of error, and that sort of validates the work that the CAC was doing to say that a majority of the respondents, meaning voters and residents, non-voters, supported the idea, and that we provide that information back to the CAC and back to the board so they can make their final decisions.
Thank you, Brian. So Missy, to kind of wrap up this panel, can you talk about some of the biggest challenges you faced and the lessons that you learned?
Sure. I think the main one for me was really just managing the work and scheduling, making sure we got the technical memos in enough time to review them, do the QA/QC, provide that information back to the consultant, and then they can, do any revisions prior to sending that out to the Customer Advisory Committee, because we wanted to give the Customer Advisory Committee all the technical memos about a week before the meeting, so they had time to review that. So it seemed to me that was initially was hard to get synced up, and I think as we went along, we did a better job at coordinating and scheduling that. And then also we had to prepare the PowerPoint slides based on those technical memos, and then we had to share all of that information with the team. So we really needed a lot more time than I had originally anticipated. So that was a big lesson learned for me. So add more time in your schedule when you have to do this type of work. And then also one other thing that I was aware of, but it just became more apparent as we went through it, we use this software to kind of rank our water main replacement. And all the information that we put in there is great information now, but in 2 years from now or 5 years from now, that information may or may not be that good. So we just need to make a point to look at that data, update it. If our criteria changes, we'll we'll have to work together and make sure we update that so our water main replacement is in accordance with that model.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to cover the future of the CAC and our next steps with the project, and then we'll open it up for our second Q&A. So we're currently in the process of developing a wider public engagement plan and strategy around Project 2030's implementation. We're also finalizing the implementation plan. Once those are complete in early 2020, we'll take it to our board for their direction and ultimate decision. From there, we'll begin to implement. The CAC, though, is not finished. We have started a new project with them in October. They're now working on our meter replacement study, and we're expecting that study to go for about another 18 months. We're hoping to continue to use them for a variety of projects in the future and continue to get their input. So at this time, I'll open it up for Q&A.
This is a question for the survey. When you surveyed the alternatives, and did you include the impact on rates in the on the alternatives? Did you tell the folks how it would impact rates over time?
Basically, the survey looked at what we would call a ballot question. We not only do this kind of work for districts that have a decision their board makes, but we also do revenue measures that actually appear on the ballot. So what the voter is looking for is a brief statement. We tried to use the legal standards of a ballot question to do that, and that's what we tested. It talked about interest rates, it talked about the total amount, so it looked like what a bond might be, essentially. And that's the level of information that we provided them.
Hi, good morning. Stephen Cash, Carlsbad Municipal Water District, right here in North County, San Diego. I see on the schedule was water main assessment for a little less than a year. Can you tell me what went into that? Or what methods that included?
The water main assessment?
Yes.
Well, there was, we started out with, inputting the data into our GIS. We did not have all of the information in our GIS system, so we actually had to go through all of our files and pull out all of our as-builts. And so the engineering team, we sat many hours pulling records, and then we boxed all those documents up, and we had a consultant that actually scanned all those documents. And then Harris had another consultant that actually inputted all of that data into GIS. So we had all of the diameter sizes, which I think we already had that, but we had like the age and all of the appropriate information in that software. And then that was transitioned into our Innovise. We use Innovise for our asset management software. And then when we did that, I don't know if you are going to touch upon the asset management model at all, but we did look at different factors, likelihood of failure and consequence of failure. So we did come up with different factors, and we rated those factors and put that into the model. And then based on that, that gave us a list of water mains that needed to be replaced.
Okay, great, thank you.
Given that the CAC is going to be used for upcoming projects, is there like a term limit on membership, or how will changes in membership with that committee be handled?
Our CAC does not currently have term limits. The resolution has it set up for just these two projects. Going forward, if we wanted to add more, we would need a new resolution and could potentially consider either term limits or cycling in new members in a variety of different ways. One way we have done it so far is through our alternates, and we're currently, for those alternates, we use the same list of people who applied for the first round.
So I have a question for the engineer. When you ran the model to find the total risk for the different sections of pipe, did anything surprise you that you didn't already know before on your system?
I would say there wasn't very many surprises. Our model is still at the very beginning stages of the model. We have the size, the age, the type, and we are going to use the time between now and 2030 to really refine that model, giving it more information on what pipes are leaking, what pipes are breaking. There's a cost component, asset management lifecycle component of the software that we've been using. So we're going to use that over the next 10 years to really hone the model. But so far, the exact pipes you would expect to be the highest risk were.
Yeah. No, great model. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to touch on that, we did find that our transmission mains are, probably the first sections of pipelines that we do need to look at a little bit more closely. The model is great. It is a good first take on what needs to be replaced, but we do plan on doing some field inspections as well to kind of validate the model.
Wayne Miller from Yorba Water District. We had some problem with rates, some people know, but anyways, we had a committee like this. It worked out quite well for us. I can tell you the committee did not want board members on it. They didn't want the general manager on it. They wanted to get expert opinion where they needed it, and so that's how it was run. And they were given 6 months, and the board adopted most of their policies. I'll just mention that. I'm glad, I was going to ask if you had a facilitator, because they did want a facilitator. They elected their own president anyways, who wrote the final document. It was a lawyer anyways. But anyways, like you said, there's a lot of qualified people. I have a question of your project. I'm interested in the question that was asked about rates. So obviously you're not going to change 200 or 250 miles of pipe in 2030. So it must be scheduled over a period of time. So to the question asked earlier by a gentleman over there, what type I know they're not final, but what type of percentage increase with prepaying, and you had options 1 and 2, I guess Rev Tellis has come up with. So what type of percent increase are people looking at? Is it a 25% increase, 50%? Is it something less than that with one of those 2 plans?
Sure. So this is a 50-year planning period from 2030 to 2080, and in terms of percentage, it was hovering anywhere from the low 3s to 5% each year. But for actual dollar amounts, we focus more on the pre-funding with an actual dollar amount. And what we showed was, what if we kept it constant as just a surcharge on the meter size, and we had different variations of if we keep it fixed over the 10 years, or if we let it start low and slowly increase over time. And from that standpoint, if we did the pre-funding, it ranged from around $9 to $12 a month, and then the $9 would just be fixed throughout the entire duration of the 10 years. So that was an example of giving them a little bit more substance in terms of what is the rate impacts to customers and what the return they get from that investment. Oh, years.
50 years.
Hi, Leon Shapiro with the Triumpha Water and Sanitation District. With respect to the CAC, do you anticipate utilizing them as ambassadors out to the community as a whole when you have fully formulated what your plan will be? And would you think you might have any pushback from the CAC to be used in that function?
Thank you. Yes, we do plan to incorporate the CAC in our public engagement plan and use them as ambassadors. We've already had quite a few of them be open to that idea and kind of start to do that. So we will use them to help spread our message on social media, out in their individual neighborhoods, through their neighborhood associations. We're going to be completing basically like a mini strategic plan or communications plan for this project, and that will all be incorporated into it.
Yeah, you presented the 21 alternatives to the CAC, and I was wondering, how did you address, did they have different options that they wanted addressed and looked at as funding alternatives?
I'll take that one. I think from the number of alternatives that we had that range from, not having any pre-funding or debt all the way to maximizing the debt amount, there was typically always a scenario in those 21 that would be selected by the CAC members, all 24. And you notice that one of the last graphics, there was around 5 alternatives that didn't get any votes. So we definitely had, that shows that we definitely had more alternatives than what were needed to then hone in and show a trend of where the CAC members would then target for what they felt we should continue on to the market research.
All right, are there any other questions? Looks like we have one more.
As the board representative to the CAC group and through this project, what was your biggest surprise?
Well, it wasn't the quality of staff and the quality of the presentations that were made, because I've watched them for several years, and they did a great job presenting the material in a way that people could understand. The growth, well, nothing really surprised me, because I knew that if you gave bright people information, they would be able to come to decent decisions over time. Reasoned and reasonable people can offer steps forward. And I wasn't surprised by that, because I knew they were going to get good information, and I know bright people can make good decisions if you give them the opportunity. So there was no surprise other than watching the growth and enjoying the growth. And at the end of every meeting, the points that the members made were all spot on. And for me, it's looking ahead. This project is gonna end long after I'm gone. And I really look forward to watching somebody at some point saying, back in 2020, when they started this project, the board made a really good decision and had a plan for replacing infrastructure. As a society, we don't work hard enough on infrastructure. You got the whole PG&E thing and the fires. You have roads that are degrading, and people on boards need to be looking to the future, and that's what we're doing. We want to set up the next generation so that they don't have to worry about coming up with $500 million in 2035 to replace all this pipe. We want to set them up to succeed so future generations, future boards can make the specific decisions. We can't hold a future board to spend the money like we want to. Any board can change anything they want at any time. But we want to set them up to succeed and be in a position where future boards, future staff have the resources and tools they need so that things are a lot easier for them than they're going to be in other districts. And that's, Citrus Heights Water has done a great job. This is not the first time the district has made good decisions. Since the beginning 100 years ago, they have made sound decisions. There's a project that we're coming up on the end of now that was, when did they start that? Almost 30 years ago, 20 years ago, planning replacements. We've been doing it. We've been making good decisions. So we're not the first board that's ever thought of looking forward. We're following in a great tradition of looking ahead so that the future generations don't have to pay the whole price for the decisions we're not making today.
We have time for one more if there are any last-minute questions. All right, well, thank you all for being on the panel, and thanks for joining us.